This is Market Pathways, your premium guide to global medical device regulation, reimbursement, and policy. Become a part of the global MedTech community at mystrategist.com.
Welcome to the Market Pathways podcast. I'm Steve Levin, Editor-in-Chief of Market Pathways and MedTech Strategist. And today we're pleased to bring you a bonus edition of the Market Pathways podcast. Today's edition will feature a panel discussion from our recent Dublin Innovation Summit conference that we hold every April at the Shelburne Hotel in Dublin. And it seems like every year for the past few years, we've had a panel discussion talking about the medical device regulation, MDR, in Europe. And the discussion has always focused on extending the time deadlines rather than trying to substantively deal with the challenges and the problems that MDR presents. This year, we had a panel that for the first time talked about the likelihood of there being substantive changes in the MDR and its companion diagnostics regulation, the IVDR, and the possibility that over the next couple of years, we'll actually see European regulators and legislators enact changes to the MDR that could help address some of the concerns that industry has raised since the MDR was implemented back in 2017. So for those of you who weren't able to attend the Dublin conference, we got a very positive response to this panel, and we wanted to share it with you through the podcast, which is what we're doing today. So we hope you enjoy this bonus edition of the Market Pathways podcast with this discussion from our Dublin Innovation Summit on changes to MDR.
Or so early, people will drift in. I want to thank everybody for popping up early to kick off the last day of the conference, and I particularly want to thank our panelists for getting on early and starting what is an annual rite at this conference, and that is the annual MDR panel. So it seemed like, maybe not since 17, but pretty close. It seems like every year we do one of these panels, and in my mind, it shows you how naive I am. I'm thinking, oh, this will be the last time we talk about revising MDR, because by next year, everybody will have fixed things and it'll be working smoothly and we can just move on to a different topic. And obviously that is not the case. So this panel has kind of a deja vu feel to me, as we start off here. So let me introduce our panelists. On my far right is Petra Zoellner. Petra is with MedTech Europe, which everyone here knows is the MedTech Trade Association for Europe. To Petra's left is Tom Melvin, and Tom used to be able to walk to the Shelburne from his former post at Trinity. Now he's got a 2-hour drive from Galway, and again, really pleased to have Tom here. And then Christina is with BVMed, and BVMed really it's the German MedTech Trade Association, and credit to BVMed for flagging this issue early, and we'll get into your white paper and some of the recommendations that you've made. And then to my immediate right, Pedro Eerdmans from NAMSA, and Pedro, in addition to NAMSA, has had a boatload of experience both on the company side, on the notified body side, so you wear a lot of hats in your background. So why don't we start and just talk, and again, I go back to kind of what I said about this being, on the one hand, kind of an annual rite of spring, here in Dublin. But I think this year is truly different. I think there's a different sense of possibility, because in the past, really the conversation has focused on extending the deadlines for both MDR and IVDR, what some people would refer to as just kind of kicking the can down the road a piece, and not really dealing with the substantive issues. This year, like I said, it takes on a different tone, and it seems like the powers that be, and by that I mean the Council of Parliament and the Commission, have really kind of taken to heart the need to substantively change MDR. And I want to talk a little bit about why that is, why that change has occurred, and if you agree, maybe you disagree that that's not the case, and if so, then what are the possible changes? We've seen this, what's called the targeted evaluation, and then 600 plus comments from people and organizations with recommendations and changes. So why don't we start with, first of all, do you accept my characterization of the current state of play of MDR? And if so, why do you think things have changed from our past discussions? And Petra, why don't we start with you, and then we can just kind of go down the line.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen, and good morning, everyone, all of you who have made it to this early panel session. So I think I do accept your characterization with a big but, Stephen. I think, as industry, we've been calling for years for changes in the regulatory system for MDR and also the diagnostics regulation, and asking the European Commission and Parliament and Council, let's make Europe a more innovation-friendly place to do business, a better place for investment, and so on. And the regulatory system has been one of the big blocking factors, I think, for investors considering locating here. And the Commission has been responding, and there's a shorter-term plan and a longer-term plan that's in the works. The longer-term plan, I'll start with there, is to reform the two regulations, medical devices and diagnostics regulations, probably starting sometime in 2026. The reform process, we should see some proposals. That could take some time to land. And in the immediate term, we've been urging the Commission to take short-term measures to bring a more stable investment climate here for Europe. And so we do see the Commission is listening to that. And there are plans afoot by the end of this year to, for example, put in place maximum timeline caps on notified body processes, like for the certification of devices and also for making changes to devices. So I think there are a lot of things afoot here, Stephen. There are also a lot of gaps, though. And
we'll get into the specifics of the short and long term, but I just wanted to see if you felt I was in line with what you all are hearing. Tom, is that consistent with what you're hearing?
I think Petra has described the policy landscape, and it's actually a lot longer than 2017. We started talking about changing regulations in 2008,
right,
and we won't be finished until at least 2028. 20 years of policy discussions on a framework that might remain suboptimal as a result. I guess when I think about innovation in these regulations, as Petra was saying, there are some urgent measures. We have like a new task force on breakthrough technologies. They might have something by the end of the year. And there's things for lower risk devices happening. There are those larger policy changes where it's difficult to say at this stage. We're not sure what the Commission will do in terms of legislative proposals. And my own sense of it is that if you compare the United States and Europe, there's a lot of changes in the US, with the reduction in force, etc. It feels like we have a sports car in the US that's having a sledgehammer taken to it, where we don't know if that will change innovation support. In Europe, it's more of a flotilla. All kinds of organizations between the 31 authorities, over 50 notified bodies, and all of the stakeholders. So there is a huge emphasis now that innovation and competitiveness aspects need to be better addressed. But I think the lesson we have to learn in Europe is that when you look at the change that happened with FDA maybe 10 or 15 years ago, they realized you needed to do practical things to make your development pathway clearer, with either technical or clinical clear advice, protocol agreement, that kind of thing. That strengthens funding pitches, it strengthens market pathways, it makes the whole thing work better. And in Europe, we're going to have to figure out how do you get that practical advice at the earliest stage of development. So we'll have policy changes, but how that percolates into the practical things that developers need, that's going to take some time to figure out.
And you bring up a good point, which is kind of at the base of my question, which was kind of what has given rise now to this newfound interest on behalf of the powers that be? And do you think a large part of it is to try to restore innovation in the medical device sector to Europe, which has been lost since at least 17 as far as MDR goes?
Yeah, it is heavily valued now amongst lots of the policy institutions, but we have a lot of divergence.
Right.
You know, there was a non-paper from the Council emphasizing European Medicines Agency. We don't know the perception of the unit in the Commission responsible for policy as to how they might reorganize things, and governance is kind of the big question at the minute. So,
right, and we're gonna, and I want to delve into that. Christina, let me kind of put the same basic question to you as to kind of, are you coming at this from the same direction in terms of, do you see an increased appetite now for substantive change, and do you think a lot of that has to do with the recognition that the current regimen under MDR was really risking, Europe's place as a source of innovation in MedTech?
Yeah, absolutely, and I want to bring in a bit the national view within this whole in this whole topic, and want to highlight also the German initiatives, not only from industry side, but also from political side. You mentioned already the non-paper. It was not the first thing German politicians brought in. And there is, of course, a new development within Germany at the moment, right now, because we have a new government. It's not completely done yet. The new chancellor will be elected next week on Tuesday, so the plan. The government is confirmed next week, and there is one specific highlight I want to make, because in Germany we do have MedTech mentioned as a leading industry in the coalition agreement of the government, and this is a major thing we have to, as an industry, we have to take as an opportunity, because when MedTech is leading industry in the papers based for the next 4 years in the government, there is a lot of space and things we can build on, and furthermore, the chancellor made because it's not all on regulatory matters, it's also competitiveness, and especially innovation is a big thing within competitiveness. And the chancellor made this to an executive matter, and will tackle this. And we also had, together with MedTech Europe, discussions with DJ Trade. And the current economic world situation is also influencing this whole topic of how attractive is innovation in Europe or in USA, and there is also the big point of non-tariff barriers.
Right, and we're going to definitely touch on that,
yeah.
But you bring up an interesting point, and I think now it might be helpful for us to kind of take a step back. I mean, we're sitting here in Dublin, but we've got a global audience, many of whom may not be as familiar as everybody here on the panel with the, I'll call it, tripartite structure of European government, and may not be familiar with the role that the Council, the Commission, the Parliament play, as well as the role that the member states play, and viewing the EU as a monolithic entity when in fact it is 27 separate countries still, and that plays a role. And you mentioned what's going on in Germany, and I just would offer the suggestion that what we're hearing is that you have member states like Germany, like France, like Ireland, where MedTech is a dominant part and an important part of the economy, that may be viewing these issues, and by these issues I mean changes to the MDR and IVDR, differently than, and again, no disrespect to any other nations, but countries such as Spain or Greece, where perhaps there's not that large of a MedTech presence, and they may view this differently. So I'm going to start with Petra, and then anybody feel free to chime in, but let's do kind of a little bit of background, the role that the key entities in as we say, an elevator pitch, what the role it has, because again, the distinction between changes that may need to go through some of the legislative bodies and changes that can be done on a regulatory basis, which you all have alluded to. Petra, do you want to start, and then everybody else can just chime in?
Sure. So the European system is quite complicated, but I'm going to simplify it. So apologies to any real experts in the system who are out there. So the European Commission, first of all, I think it's important to understand that the European Commission can do a lot through implementing acts through the tools of the current regulatory system, and they can do a lot if they want to do so to bring a lot more predictability and clarity and stability to the current system. So they have a program in place for 2025, and that needs to continue, and we need to continue pushing them to do more of that. In addition, the European Commission also has the power to write proposals to amend the regulatory, the two regulations for medical devices and IVDs. And that is something that they're considering for early 2026. And once they put a proposal on the table, it's important to understand that any actual implementation of those proposals can take years before they arrive. So once the Commission puts proposals on the table, say early 2026, then the proposals go to the European Parliament and the Council, who then, one after the other, look at the proposals, they can weigh in, they can discuss, they can make changes to them, and this can take a couple of rounds or 3 rounds even, and eventually then they vote on a final proposal that they both agree on, and then there would be a transition period afterwards. That whole process of the Parliament and the Council could take anywhere between 18 months and 3 years. So if you're looking at today, we are in May 2025, you could be looking at actual amendments to the regulatory system, which are being worked on now already, only arriving and making a difference for everyone in, say, anywhere between 2 to 3 to 4 years from today. So I think it's important to know that. And in the meantime, as I said, the Commission can do a lot through the current tools of the regulations to give us more stability and more predictability.
Well, I think the question is, what will you get in 4 years? What we see with the MDR to get all member states signing off, it was made so broad and so unclear that we need a lot of guidelines and MDCG guidelines to explain what we really wanted to say. So I'm afraid that when this
We're going to get into a lot of acronyms, and I apologize for interrupting, but for those who may not know what the MDCG is and that process, just kind of, again, give them a 30-second explanation.
So to make it more clear, they now have more than 30 guidelines explaining with templates how to report adverse events, how a CER should be written, how a clinical evaluation report should be written, etc. So they try to, what should probably have been in the MDR, they now later on made those standards so that everybody became in line. And what I know in the meetings we had with the team NB was when we were discussing the MDR, the English was reading something completely different than we did.
And Team MB is a group that really reflects the views of notified bodies, yeah. And MDCG is a group that offers guidance. Exactly. But the concern is that there have been now more guidances than can fill this room in terms of and which gets to the point that maybe it's beyond the point of being helpful.
Yeah, and for me, I see guidance also a problem for innovation. Because the moment you just have to fill in a template, there will be no thought process. It will be a kind of tick box exercise. So when you come with innovation, with something new, it doesn't fit in the normal guidance. Then you have to do your risk-benefit analysis. And I think a lot of notified bodies are struggling with that because, let's say, they're now getting lazy with all those templates and those guidance.
I want to get into the notified body question, but Christina and Tom, let me let you weigh in on this issue of, in terms of, we talked about the overall structure, and what do you see as realistic timelines? And we don't have to get into the details yet, but what kind of general changes or revisions can be done on the short-term basis versus those that will require a longer period of time to adopt?
You want to go first?
So in terms of shorter-term measures, perhaps in this coming year or so, we should have a medical device coordination group, so a consensus regulatory guidance for breakthrough, but also for some lower risk technologies, what they call Article 61.6b. This is a part of the medical device regulation that says plates, pins, screws, wedges, but it implies that they wouldn't need a clinical investigation even if they fell into a higher risk classification. So
does that come out of there's a couple of pilot programs, one on what I call a comparator to the breakthrough program in FDA, but also, for example, on orphan devices or pediatrics. Are those the kind of short-term changes?
Yeah, so there'd maybe be three things then. So there'd be the breakthrough device guidance that's just started, a plan for those lower risk technologies where they don't need a clinical study, and then another group that was brought in with the medical device regulation was European Medicine Agency expert panels. So I've joined them in the last couple of years, and initially they were just giving opinions on new and innovative devices after they've had their notified body assessment. You do opinion on that clinical evaluation. So that's how they started, but in the last 2 years, essentially, those panels have started to give advice. So they can give advice to any high-risk device manufacturer, and they can also give advice to orphan or pediatric device manufacturers. You get a designation as a first step and then advice. That's just starting, so I'm helping EMA with those first advice pilots. There's about 5 technologies going through it, and the first couple have been designated, and they're now into the advice stage. So some of these things are very small and at a germinal stage, but a helpful way to get that clinical development advice in the system.
I should also give Tom credit. He wears a number of hats in addition to his teaching at Galway. You're an advisor, a clinical advisor to the EU, and also you work with the Biomedical Alliance, and I want to get into the report that you worked on with them subsequently. But Christina, let me let you weigh in as well.
Well, to predict more or less concrete timelines, it's very hard. It's complicated, but as Petra and Tom also already mentioned, there are 2 different approaches. The Commission wants to implement short-term measures that are already published, the plans, and there are consultations and so on supporting innovations and supporting the getting or keeping products on the market within the regulatory framework. Also, what's not mentioned yet, the electronic instruction for use is one point of these short-term measures, and these are to make it a bit more complicated. Who is not familiar with the European regulatory system, they are faster or could be implemented quicker because it's not the regulatory or the same political and lawmaking process. The Commission may publish amendments or implementing decisions, implementing acts, delegated acts when it's possible within the MDR, when the competences are given, and in this case there is no negotiation between Parliament, Council, and Commission. It's only a Commission proposal, and the Council has to agree. Mm-hmm. It's even shorter. It's quicker, and these are. There are a bunch of points on these lists. Industry would like to see even more than the Commission is publishing yet, but we don't know. Hoping that there are a few more coming. And the structural change of the MDR and IVDR, I completely agree with you, Petra. This could take years, but it's not said that it must take years, because we saw And I will come back to the power of the Council and also the European Parliament again. We saw that changes within the regulatory, the text of the regulations could be implemented very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Hey, have you heard of Market Pathways? Market Pathways provides the most in-depth analysis you'll find of the changes happening in medical device regulation and reimbursement every day. They address the complexity in regulatory affairs and beyond by helping you digest and contextualize technical topics like Medicare and MDR. Visit mystrategist.com/trial today to start your free 5-day trial to Market Pathways. Again, that's mystrategist.com/trial for 5 days of online access.
So we've been talking mostly about process, which is critical to the moving forward on changing MDR. I want to switch gears a little bit and try to get into some of the substance. And we're not going to obviously have time to get into all of the issues that we're going to talk about, but let's hit a couple of highlights. And let me start with notified bodies, because after MDR was implemented in 17, one of the first bottlenecks was the lack of notified body resources. And this issue has evolved, and to the point where in talking to companies, I actually hear two different stories. One is that now there are plenty of notified body resources out there and this is no longer a problem. And then the other side says, well, actually the notified bodies went too far, they hired too many people, they've got too much staff, and they're going to end up shutting down notified bodies, losing staff, which could result back where we started with a notified body bottleneck. So let me start, Pedro, with you. Yeah. You've got experience with notified bodies. What's the kind of current state of play? And also let me raise an overarching question, which is one of the big issues with notified bodies previously was the inconsistency. This is I'm going back to the old directive. The inconsistency and the ability to do what in the US we call forum shopping, so companies could look for a notified body that they would think give them the most preferential treatment, but yet MDR was supposed to address that and enforce a kind of uniformity, but also we're hearing that that's really not the case, and there still are variations. So a lot of questions to unpack there, but go ahead.
No, I agree that there was a talk in the beginning that there are not enough notified bodies. I think that was solved, but then the extension came, and so notified bodies started to scale up, and then suddenly people withdraw all their technical files because it was not a rush anymore. And I think the notified bodies that hired their own people were getting into financial difficulties. The notified bodies that worked a lot with consultants, they just didn't hire those consultants, and the consultants became then had their personal problems. And I think what we're seeing now, at least what I hear feedback with my colleagues, my ex-colleagues from notified bodies, is that probably we have too many notified bodies. It's if you look at only CE marking is not enough to survive. So you need to do training, you need to do auditing. That's really where
And I should also distinguish, and I apologize for interrupting, but I should also distinguish between MDR notified bodies and notified bodies for diagnostics, for the IVDR, because MDR has always kind of been ahead of, if you will, IVD in terms of the capacity for notified bodies.
Yeah, that's correct. So we were always afraid, because there were just a few IVDR notified bodies. I think that is increasing significantly. The feeling I have from my contacts is that we probably end up with a few large notified bodies. Time-wise, and also working with NAMSA and talking with startup companies that are now interacting with notified bodies, it still takes a lot of time. And one of the biggest issues that also the larger companies have is a lack of transparency, not knowing when things will come. I think that can be improved a lot. I'm a little bit worried when we get deadlines that they have to review a certain deadline. I think a lot of deadlines will not be met. And it's more maybe a paper exercise than that it will be.
Are you worried that the pendulum's going to swing too far and that eventually we'll not have enough notified bodies, or you think that the level will remain pretty status quo?
I think that it all depends on how the MDR will change. A lot of work is in the whole administration, and a lot of paperwork, a lot of checking, and that's also the issue for the industry. Right. It's a massive amount of admin work also after you have CE mark.
Right. Right.
And so if that can be made much easier, then also notified body has less to check. And that will definitely help with notified bodies just coping with the workload.
Christina, I want you to address the notified body issue, but let me also put another layer on top of that to make sure we touch on what is the most critical questions out there, and that is the form of how this is going to be operated, how the MDR changes. In other words, there's a lot of movement towards some kind of centralization, and the question of what form that takes. Should there be a centralized MedTech office similar to what happened with AI and the creation of the AI office? Should it be housed in the European Medicines Agency, where, of course, as has been historically true with MedTech, MedTech runs the risk of kind of being subsumed by its bigger, older brother or sister, the pharma industry, and not getting the resources it needs? Or is there yet a third, more hybrid solution as far as creating the centralized authority? So why don't you feel free to address any of those?
Where should I start? I think the agreement within to be honest, the proposal from industry, because it was a proposal from industry to have a governance structure, the agreement within other stakeholders is already there, also on side of notified bodies, because they are struggling with a lot of things you tackled also. I think you can sum it up within one sentence. I've heard from a notified body in Germany. It's not the biggest one, it's a small one, but a notified body who performs conformity assessments of very much or a lot of high-risk products. He said he was or is not able, since the MDR was implemented and entered into force and has to be applied, he was not able to perform one project within one complete session and structure. In every project he started, the things within the system changed, and he has to adopt, the manufacturer has to adopt. We mentioned guidelines, because guidelines were published, or anything else was changed. So the system changed during the projects, the conformity assessments, and this is a major point why the system is so lacking, because you can't rely on a complete process. You can't rely on frames that you have, because they are not there, and there is a lack of efficiency. You also mentioned the ticking box exercise. That's a big problem for industry and also notified bodies. And to get rid of this, to be more efficient in the complete system for everyone who is a part of the system, and to have a single institution that is able to make decisions, we need a governance structure. Where it is located, where it is, how it is structured, if it's an office within the commission, if it's within EMA, or a complete separate medical device structure. I don't want to call. I don't know what to call it. Agency.
Leverage.
That's not the point. Mm-hmm. The point is, what's the task, or what are the tasks? What are the responsibilities, and what's the decision making within this structure. And of course, you need experts there.
Right. And let me build off of that. Tom, if everyone will forgive a shameless plug for one of our publications, you did what I thought was a great interview with my colleague Dave Fillmore in our publication, Market Pathways, where you talked about the report that you helped work on with the Biomedical Alliance. And I don't want to speak for you, but your view coming out of the article was that this should live in the European Medicines Agency. So can you elaborate on that and why you think that's the best spot?
Sure. So at the Biomedical Alliance, this is an organization that's an umbrella group that represents 35 European clinical associations, and then with that, 400,000 doctors from right across cardiology, orthopedics, and diagnostics as well. So in March, we published, I guess, the most detailed perspective on medical technology regulations from the clinical community that I've ever seen. It's about a 60-page document, but hopefully that's not too scary, but we cover the challenges that we see from the clinical and diagnostic communities with the MDR and IVDR. You know, I think if we were to design a new system today from scratch, it wouldn't look at all like this one. But at Biomed, we recognize that this is the system we have. And when we looked at the opportunity costs or different things that we could do, we think that the European Medicine Agency could play a significant role. One of the other things we say in the Biomed recommendations, and I think this is a really important point, is that we have to find a way to create better communities of regulators. So right now, you go to notified bodies and then it goes to expert panels, and these are doctors often in surgical theatres and white coats. They've never really done any regulatory work. So, you know, what we need to do is figure out a way to get these clinical experts with people with regulatory expertise and have them giving advice at the earliest stages in the development process. But there's a lot more detail in the report, so if you're interested, I'd encourage you to look.
And again, I highly recommend this article because Tom went into great depth on specific recommendations, more than we'll have time to get into here. So, and anybody interested in that, just let me know and I'm happy to send you a copy. One other issue I want to make sure we touch on that's top of mind for a lot of people in industry is the whole 5-year recertification process. And Petra, let me let you kick this one off because there seems to be a split in terms of how industry views that, which is we don't really need to continue this 5-year recertification, as opposed to the notified bodies, for example, as expressed through Team NB, that says this is something that we really should continue. Talk about the pros and cons, and where do you think ultimately the legislators and regulators fall as far as certification, continuing it or getting rid of it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a topic which is very dear to industry's heart in particular. If we look at recertification, it's an every 5 years process. It's not linked to the QMS 13485 ISO certification 3-year cycle. It's just an arbitrary 5-year cycle of recertification. It's very costly. We see a lot of variation across notified bodies in terms of what they do and what they ask the companies to do. And we've seen some companies saying that the recertification process cost more than the initial certification process did. So that should give you some idea. Another said it was about 5% of the initial cost. So that should give you some idea of the variety and the impact here. So back to your question, Stephen. I think notified bodies are in general reluctant to have major changes to the system right now. They want to see stability, and of course, recertification is something that I think is of interest for them to continue seeing. In terms of recertification itself, we would like to see as an industry that it goes, that the certificate validity follows the lifetime of the device. If there is, however, or there are signals coming post-market on particular devices, or if you have a really novel device where follow-up could be helpful from the notified body perspective, or if you have changes that would really mean that a device becomes a new device, then sure, recertify. But having it as a blanket requirement across all devices doesn't make sense for us, considering that there's so many post-market checks, that there's unannounced audit, there's annual surveillance audits, change notification, and so on and so forth. in place. So recertification seems to be very redundant, especially as a blanket requirement across all kinds of devices. I think the regulators in general are wary of getting rid of recertification. I think there's some mix-up between the idea that they want to drive compliance across the industry, that there are some companies out there who aren't as compliant with the requirements of MDR and IVDR as they should be, and the idea of patient safety, right? So I think when it comes to recertification, will recertification drive higher compliance in the industry as a matter of course? I'm not sure that it will. If you have notified bodies coming, checking your QMS compliance, checking your periodic safety update reports, coming and looking, doing the unannounced audits, that should certainly pick up issues with the devices on the market and with the devices in production. In terms of recertification, I'm not sure that there's really an added value there for most devices where there are no problems being kicked up post-market. So I think, however, we have a long way to go to convince the regulators of this, because a lot of them are still sticking to their guns and saying, well, we should have it, it's an additional safety mechanism, we are not quite sure if it's really something that needs to be gotten rid of. So I think that discussion is still one that needs to happen.
Great. In the 2 minutes we've got left, I just want to kind of have a couple quick lightning round questions that you guys can answer together. First is, another issue I hear constantly about is, when can we expect the Eerdmans database to come online, which was supposed to help provide increased uniformity? So if you have any ideas as far as a date, that would be helpful. And overall, I'm not going to ask you to look into a crystal ball, and because we talked about a lot of potential issues, but a year from now, in a nutshell, where do you think we will stand with regard to how much progress will have been made in revising MDR? And Petra, why don't you start? We can just go down the line.
So Eerdmans timelines, I'm now drawing a slight blank on the exact dates, but I think about 2 years from now we should be seeing a more or less fully populated Eerdmans in terms of registration of devices and also actors. So you should be able to have a look at the devices there and the companies there and who the importers are, authorized representatives. There should be a lot of data there. There's already a lot of data there, so that's already of interest to have a look at. But for vigilance and clinicals, those will come later. So just be aware of that. What was your second question?
Quickly, where do you think we'll be a year from now?
Oh, a year from now, huh? Well, I hope we'll have seen expansion of possibility to use IFU for all professional use medical devices. We'll have clear and predictable timelines for conformity assessment and change control on the table, and we will also have a really good proposals from the European Commission which will ensure that our regulatory system becomes more efficient, innovation-friendly, and well-governed. So that's where I would hope, in any case, that we would be 1 year from now.
Tom, we're out of time. I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, I guess I'll leave the Eerdmans one, because I don't know when the clinical module will come. I don't think they know when it will come. No. And in a year's time, I guess we'll be heading into the Irish presidency of the European Union will be starting. We'll have probably that legislative proposal, and the politics will be increasing in a year's time, I'd suspect.
So my takeaway is that I look forward to the four of us being together next year here in Dublin talking about the same subject.
We hope you enjoyed this bonus edition of the Market Pathways podcast. And we urge you to continue to listen to the podcast and read Market Pathways and MedTech Strategist to follow the continuing changes that are likely to be taking place with the MDR and the IVDR as discussed in today's panel. Thanks again for listening to the Market Pathways podcast.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. Your support is valuable and makes us better. Please remember to leave a review and rate Market Pathways on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to listen.